Tonight, I'll tell you one of those stories. It isn't about monsters that hide in the dark. It's about something far quieter. Something that watches, remembers, and whispers back when you think you're alone. This is the story of the Whispered Doll. 1. The auction. It started on a gray afternoon in the fall of 1987. The town of Meriden was holding its annual estate auction, a small gathering where locals bid on the belongings of the recently deceased. Most of the items were ordinary: books, dishes, furniture no one really wanted. But near the back of the hall, on a worn velvet cloth, sat a single porcelain doll. Its eyes were glassy blue. Its skin cracked around the edges, like it had been smiling for too long. The red dress it wore was faded but carefully ironed, as though someone had loved it once. The auctioneer announced it had belonged to a woman named Eleanor Wren, who died alone in her home that summer. No children, no husband, no visitors, only the doll. No one bid on it, until Martha and Harold Gray, a couple in their late 60s, offered $5. They collected antiques, and it seemed quaint. But as the auctioneer's gavel fell, one of the helpers swore he heard something strange, a sound that didn't belong in that room. It was faint, like a breath drawn through glass. He turned toward the doll, and for a second, just a second, he thought it had moved. 2. The house on Ashwell Lane. The Grays' home stood at the very end of Ashwell Lane, a tall, narrow Victorian with ivy climbing the porch and windows that reflected nothing but gray skies. They placed the doll in the guest room, on a shelf beside an old oil lamp and a mirror framed in dust. The room smelled faintly of cedar and mothballs. That first night, the house made different sounds. Not the usual creaks or settling wood, but deliberate noises, spaced apart, like footsteps pacing just beyond the walls. Martha couldn't sleep. Every so often she'd hear what sounded like soft talking, a voice too quiet to make out. At first, she thought it was Harold whispering in his sleep. But when she turned, he was still. Then she heard it again, closer this time. A soft, breathy murmur. It came from the guest room. She lay awake until dawn. 3. The whisper. The next morning, Martha told Harold. He chuckled, dismissing it as wind or an old house settling. But that night, she heard it again. A whisper, barely audible, rising from the dark hallway, like someone speaking behind a closed door. She stood outside the guest room, her hand trembling on the knob. For a long moment, she listened. It was a woman's voice. Faint, rhythmic, almost tender. "Eleanor," it said. Martha froze. Her heart pounded. She opened the door. The room was empty. The doll sat motionless on the shelf, its head tilted slightly to the side. But when she stepped closer, she swore its lips had parted, just enough to let the sound escape. 4. The guest. 2 weeks later, Martha's niece, Emily, came to visit. She was a bright girl, 21, curious and skeptical about everything. She noticed the doll right away. "Creepy little thing," she said with a laugh. "Looks like it's staring straight through you." That night, Emily slept in the guest room. At 3:04 a.m., she woke to the sound of the rocking chair moving. The lamp flickered once, then died. The room fell into thick, suffocating darkness. She turned toward the shelf. The doll was gone. Her eyes darted around, heart hammering, until she saw it. It sat in the rocking chair, facing her. Its cracked smile glowed faintly in the light of the moon. Then came the whisper. "Don't leave me," Emily screamed. When Martha and Harold burst into the room, the doll was back on the shelf, still, silent, lifeless. Emily refused to stay another night. 5. The story of Eleanor Wren. Disturbed, Martha began to research the doll's original owner. At the Meriden Library, she found a brittle newspaper clipping dated 1923. A young woman named Eleanor Wren, smiling faintly while holding a porcelain doll in her arms. The caption read, "Eleanor Wren and her handcrafted companion." Eleanor had made it herself. A passion project, according to the article, something to keep her company after her parents' death. Neighbors said she spoke to the doll constantly, called it her child, her echo. But as years passed, they said she changed. She stopped leaving her home. People passing by claimed they could hear two voices inside, Eleanor's and another, smaller one, whispering softly. By the time she died, no one had spoken to her in nearly 20 years. The police found her in her rocking chair. The doll sat on her lap, and though Eleanor's body was cold, neighbors said they saw something moving in the window that night. a silhouette rocking slowly, back and forth. 6. The change in Harold. After learning all this, something shifted in Harold. He became quiet, withdrawn. Martha would find him sitting alone in the guest room, staring at the doll for hours. Sometimes he'd murmur to it, softly, like talking to a sleeping child. When Martha asked what he was doing, he said, "She's lonely. Someone has to listen." She thought he meant Eleanor. But one night, she heard him speaking in two voices. One was his. The other was smaller, breathy, childlike. The next morning, Harold's eyes looked different, tired, glassy, like he hadn't slept for days. The doll, once pale, now seemed to have a faint flush on its cheeks, almost alive. 7. The cracks. Soon, cracks began appearing across the doll's porcelain skin, tiny at first, then spreading like veins. Martha noticed that through the cracks, something dark pulsed beneath, not blood, but a strange shadowy hue, as if the doll's insides weren't empty anymore. She tried to hide it in the attic, but the next morning, it was back on the shelf, exactly where it had always been. The whispers grew bolder. Now they came from behind her when she washed dishes, or from the hall when she turned off the lights. Always the same faint, murmuring rhythm, and sometimes her name. Once, she found a piece of paper on her nightstand, for words written in shaky handwriting. She remembers your name. 8. The dream. That night, Martha dreamed of Eleanor Wren. She saw her sitting by the fire, sewing the doll together with trembling hands. Her face was streaked with tears. "She won't talk to me anymore," Eleanor whispered. I had to make her remember me. The needle pricked her finger. A drop of blood fell on the doll's lips. The doll smiled. Then Eleanor turned to Martha and said, "She doesn't like to be alone." When Martha woke, there was a single pinprick of blood on her own finger, and the doll was sitting on her bedside table. 9. The final night. The night Harold died, it rained harder than it had all year. Lightning flashed through the windows, lighting the walls like broken glass. Harold locked himself in the guest room. Martha could hear him talking, low, frantic, pleading. "Please," he said, "don't make me choose." When she forced the door open, she saw him sitting in the rocking chair, the doll in his lap. He was pale, eyes wide, whispering to it. "She says you're trying to take me away." Martha stepped closer. "Harold, you need to put it down." He shook his head. "She remembers me now," he said, smiling faintly. "She promised I'd never be alone." Then his voice changed, higher, smaller. "She keeps her promises." And then silence. The doll's glass eyes glistened in the lightning. Harold didn't move again. 10. Aftermath. The coroner said it was a heart attack. Martha didn't argue. She begged the police to take the doll away, but by the time they returned, it had vanished. She left the house that same week, moved into a small apartment near her sister's home, and never went back. But the whispers didn't stop. At first they were faint, like a song heard through a wall. Then they became clearer. One night, she woke to find the shape of a small figure sitting in the corner of her room. Porcelain skin, red dress, its cracked smile shining faintly in the dark. When she turned on the light, nothing, but the air smelled faintly of dust and cedar. 11. The new owner. 10 years later, a woman named Claire Hensley bought the old gray house. She'd always dreamed of restoring old homes. While cleaning, she found a box labeled guest room. Inside, a porcelain doll with a faded red dress. She thought it was beautiful, if a little eerie. She placed it in her 5-year-old daughter Lily's bedroom. That night, Lily whispered through the baby monitor. Claire smiled, assuming she was talking to herself. Then she heard a second voice. Soft, childlike, but not Lily's. When she opened the door, Lily was sitting on the floor, smiling at the doll. "She said she remembers you, Mommy," Lily whispered. "She said you used to live here." Claire froze. "I've never lived here, honey." Lily tilted her head. "She said you will." 12. The tapes. A few months later, a contractor found an old tape recorder while repairing the attic floorboards. The label was nearly faded, but one word was still legible. Voices. He played it. At first, just static. Then a trembling woman's voice, Martha Gray's. "She remembers me," Martha said. "I tried to leave her, but she followed. She says she'll never stop whispering my name." Then came a faint giggle, a child's voice. "Don't leave me." The tape clicked, then went silent. The contractor never finished the job. He quit that same day. 13. The whispered doll. No one knows where the doll is now. Some say it travels through estate sales and thrift shops, passed quietly from one owner to another, always forgotten until it isn't. They say you'll know if you've owned it, even for a single night. Because once you've heard its whisper, you start hearing it everywhere. In the hum of the refrigerator, in the rustle of curtains, in the soft shuffle of your own heartbeat. A tiny, porcelain voice, lonely, persistent, calling your name. And if you answer, even once, it remembers you. If you ever find a doll in a red dress, cracked but smiling, and you think it might look beautiful on a shelf, don't bring it home. Don't even touch it. Because the whispered doll doesn't want to be owned. It only wants to be remembered. And once it remembers you, it never forgets.